the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he's my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, and you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. You're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never gonna let me down, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Hey, Fbc Student Ministry. Man, it is good to be back together with you at Midpoint Online. This Sunday is going to be Senior Sunday, and we're going to be back together in the building. Make sure you talk to your parents, and if they feel comfortable coming back together in the church building, see about registering for your spot. You have to sign up, but we can get you a spot. Just make sure you let us know if you want to come and sign up, register with the link that the church has sent out to everyone. If you have any questions or if you want any more information about that, make sure you get in touch with me. Don't wait, because the spots could all fill up. We want as many people as can be there to be there. So come celebrate our seniors with us on May 17th, this Sunday, Senior Sunday. It's going to be a good time. If you can't be there with us in person, that's okay too. You can join us online. You can join us on Facebook and on our church website. We can be together any way that we can be, in person, by technology, but let's keep gathering together. Don't forsake the gathering together. That's what it says in the Bible. Don't forsake it. Don't just give up and leave off or think it's not important. It is more important than ever to keep coming back together right now. I want to tell you a story. So in 1992, in 1988, the Russians beat the American basketball team in a terrible upset and threw the Americans out of the running for getting gold. And this was crazy. This was nuts. No one had ever thought that Russia could have beat America in basketball in 1988. But in between 1988 and 1992, when the next Olympics was, there was a rule change, and the Olympic Committee said that professional basketball players could now be on Olympic basketball teams. So the Americans put out the word and they started saying, all right, are there any NBA players who would like to be on our team? Guys, they got the best of the best. I'm talking Michael Jordan. I'm talking Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Magic Johnson, Scottie Pippen, Patrick Ewing. They got more and more. They've got the best of the best. Every great basketball player, the greatest basketball players at that time, all came forward and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's get together. Let's play for the Olympic team. Let's give up our summer and go come together and be the dream team. And that's what they called them, because they were the dream team. It was called the greatest team ever assembled. And it was arguably the most dominant squad of people ever assembled for any sport. Guys, they blew everybody out of the water. There wasn't even a competition. Every country that came up against the Americans in the Olympics that year for basketball got creamed, because they had the greatest basketball team of all time on the court. Now, they may have been the greatest basketball team ever assembled, but now I want to talk about another team. This team is not recognized by the world as a dominant force. This team has never won a gold medal. This team, however, is the winningest team of all time. This team is the most victorious team in history that will ever be. This is the greatest team of all time, and there's a place for you on that team. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about a few members of this team. Paul talks about them in Philippians chapter 2, verses 19 through 30. So let's read those together. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. For I have no one like him who was genuinely concerned for your welfare, for they all seek their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served with me in the gospel. I hope therefore to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me, and I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will come also. I have thought it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker and fellow soldier, and your messenger and minister to my need. For he has been longing for you all and has been distressed, because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill, near to death. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I am the more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice in seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. So receive him in the Lord with all joy. Honor such men, for he nearly died in the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. So there's these two guys that Paul talks about, Timothy and Epaphroditus. Both of these men were serving beside Paul while he is in prison in Rome. Paul is in prison, but he's not like in a dank, dark cell. He's more like in house arrest. He can't leave, and he has guards, and he's in chains, but he can have visitors and he can have people serving beside him, and he's not stopping his work. He is continuing his work. And these two men, Timothy and Epaphroditus, have come and served beside him and have been faithful. Let's focus a little bit more in on them. Who is Timothy? Timothy is a young man who Paul met on his second missionary journey. So as he's traveling through all of these Greek lands, he meets this young man who has a Greek father and a Jewish mother, and he is a faithful man of God. He knows the Jewish scriptures backwards and forwards, and he comes to Christ, and he follows Paul on his second missionary journey. He becomes a protege to Paul, and Paul is so glad of his faithfulness and the way that he seeks after God and the way that he loves and serves others and is his fellow warrior in the gospel. And they just traveled together. And so when Paul goes to prison, Timothy is right there with him. And Timothy became very, very close with Paul. Paul wound up sending letters. 1st and 2nd Timothy are in the Bible. Those are to this Timothy. And Paul believes that Timothy is the one that will continue the work after his work is done. And these verses tell us about Timothy. These verses tell us that Timothy is extraordinary. He is extraordinary in his unselfishness and his care for other people. He is genuinely concerned for others, and he seeks after the interest of Jesus Christ. He compares him with other people who are just care about themselves. But Timothy cares about the interest of Jesus Christ. And you may be asking yourself, well, what are the interests of Jesus Christ? Well, just think about how Jesus lived his life. Jesus lived his life for the glory of God, loving others, serving. And that's what Timothy did. He lived for the glory of God and loving others, and serving both. Timothy put Jesus Christ above everything else in his life, and it showed in his actions. Timothy was a man of proven worth. This chapter tells us that Timothy has proved that his faithfulness, he's a man of character. He will not fall away just when someone gets arrested and gets put in jail. He's not going to run away because he's afraid of also getting put in jail. No, he stays by Paul and he ministers to him and he keeps sharing the gospel. He has traveled everywhere with Paul and has shown he is a man of integrity and consistency. He's like a son to Paul because he doesn't give up on him and he stays right with him. He does what Paul asks him to do. He goes where Paul asks him to go. And he knows, because Paul's a man of God, that he's going to serve. If he's serving Paul, he's serving Christ. And when Paul spoke of sending Timothy to the Philippians, it was a huge sacrifice for him. This was a big deal. Paul didn't have a lot of friends with him in Rome. Most of the believers and the non-believers had fallen away and didn't want anything to do with Paul because Paul's in prison and might be killed at any time. He's not very popular right now. And so most people were ignoring Paul and leaving him to his own devices. But Timothy and a few others stayed close. But Paul is even willing to send his friend, his greatest friend, his closest friend, Timothy, to the Philippians in this gesture of love, in this gesture of care. Paul truly cared for the Philippians, and he lived it. He didn't just say it. And the act of sending Timothy to the Philippians was a big deal. So Timothy was a wonderful man of God and a great. And so Paul is just speaking well of him and saying, I'm going to send him to you because I care about you. Well, now let's talk about Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus is a funny name. It's a Greek name. It is close to Aphrodite, as you can tell, and you can kind of hear how it sounds the same. It's probably a variation of the name Aphrodite, which means, he was from a Greek context. Philippi was a Greek place where they worshipped Greek gods, and he was born into this place, and even though his name reflects another god, he serves the one true God with all his heart. He's a member of the Philippian church that they sent to Paul while he was in prison with a gift of money and resources, maybe some food, maybe some other things that he might need. He was a messenger that brought good tidings and resources to Paul when he needed them most. He was a gift of love from the Philippians to Paul. But back in the first century, it was dangerous to travel. And just kind of like it is right now, we don't go across the world because you could catch something. Well, Epaphroditus caught something. He got very, very sick and he almost died, but God allowed him to live. And he took his life into his hands by traveling to see Paul. He gave everything. He was brave and courageous. And Paul has viewed him, has said that he is a fellow worker, a fellow soldier, my brother, he calls Epaphroditus, that he has ministered to his needs, and he has been a faithful servant of God. And Paul just heaps praise upon him because he has worked so hard and so faithfully for God. These two men show us what it looks like to be on God's team. They show us what it looks like to be on the greatest team of all time. These are two members of this team. You can think of them as Michael Jordan and Larry Bird, maybe. They probably weren't anything like him. But they were huge members. They were leaders on this team, and they had some characteristics that displayed that they were on this team. They were faithful. They were unselfish. They followed Christ wherever he led. They loved others genuinely, and they were courageous. And guys, these are characteristics of God, people who were on God's team. But they didn't just have them in themselves. I'm not bragging on Timothy and Epaphroditus, and Paul wasn't saying, look at Timothy and Epaphroditus, they're so much better than everybody else. No, he was saying, look at how they follow God. It is God who gives them all of these qualities. Timothy and Epaphroditus didn't have any of these on their own. They would never have been able to accomplish anything without God. And this is the thing that makes God's team greater than any other team of all time. He plays on our team. He is the one that enables us to do everything that we do. By trusting God and putting themselves in God's hands, Timothy and Epaphroditus receive the power of God, and he dwells in us and gives us what we need to serve him. They are a reflection of what we were talking about last week. How, last week we talked about how God works in us to will and to work his good pleasure. He gives us the motive and the means to accomplish his will. And Tim and Epaphroditus are living that out. They are living proof that God does that for us. They are working out their salvation as they serve God, and God is giving them everything they need to serve God. And every day, we get to choose. We get to choose. Do we want to live for ourselves, or do we want to live for God? Paul described people who live for themselves when he was talking about Timothy. These people think only of themselves, and they don't think of the interests of Jesus Christ. Whereas people who live for God, they consider the interests of Jesus Christ, and they live for him. We can ask ourselves today, am I seeking my own interest and looking out for myself? Or am I seeking Christ and his interests, loving God, loving others, serving both, living for the glory of God? So we can ask ourselves, what do I look like when I'm seeking myself? And these are the things that I look like when I'm seeking myself. I find selfishness, laziness, irritableness, anger, tearing other people down, complaining, grumbling, overindulgence, wasting time on useless things, and a bunch of sin. That's what I find when I live for myself. It is not joy. It is not peace. It is not good. And it can kind of feel good for a little bit to just do whatever I want, whenever I want it. But guys, if you want a great life, if you want a satisfying life, if you want fulfillment and true joy, look at Christ. Live for him. When I'm seeking Christ, this is what I find. I find purpose, energy, joy, grace, love for others, self-control, encouragement, patience, plenty, righteousness, goodness, and much, much, much more. Guys, it's tempting. Every day you have to make this choice. Am I going to live for Christ? Am I going to live for myself? If we choose to live for Christ, He is everything we need. If we choose to live for ourselves, we will always be unsatisfied. And if we live for Christ, we are not alone. We are on that team, the greatest team of all time. But maybe you're out of practice. Maybe you're a member of the team, but you have not been practicing your skills. You've been laying around instead of going out to practice. Guys, you can change that today. That doesn't have to be the way. And you might think, well, God doesn't need me to play for His team. He has everything that He needs. Well, you're right. God does not need you. But the wonderful thing is, God wants you. He's recruiting you to be on the greatest team of all time. There's no need to sit on the sidelines. There's no need to sit at home and think that God has nothing for you. No. Even at home, God has amazing things for you if you will give yourself to Him. Practice walking in Him every day. He will bless you beyond measure. And you get to share in that victory, because the ultimate victory is always God's. The ultimate victory is in Jesus Christ. He overcame death on the cross. He rose from the dead. He is coming back again, and we can be a part of that. We can be glad on the day of Christ if we are living for Him. But if we don't live for Christ, on the day He comes back, it won't be a good day. Guys, we can choose. And if you've never joined the team of Christ, if you've never given your life to Jesus, trusted in Him for salvation, you can do that today too. You can choose to leave behind yourself and live for Christ, just like Timothy and Epaphroditus did. And the way that you do that is you recognize your sins. You tell them to Jesus. You tell Jesus, I am a sinner. I am broken. And I can't do it without you. And then you say, I believe in you, Jesus. I believe that you died on the cross for my sins and rose from the dead, and I can have new life in you. And if you pray and ask for forgiveness, Jesus will forgive you. And then you can live for Christ for the rest of your life, enjoying the fulfillment, enjoying the victory, living on the greatest team of all time. You can choose that today. Will you? It's up to you. But if you have any questions or need help, if you want any assistance with that or anything, you can contact me here at the church, or if you need my phone number, you can find that in various channels. But let me know how I can assist you, how I can love you. Don't wait. Don't let yourself live another day wrapped up in yourself and not knowing all of the wonderful things that Christ has for you. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad that we are still able to be together however we can. One day soon, I'll see you in person, maybe this Sunday. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.